In New York City, the communist mayor wants to open a grocery store run by the government. And to shop at one, you reportedly have to have a photo ID or a loyalty card. An ID to buy items at your local grocery store. But to vote in an election in America, much of this country doesn't have to show any identification at all. The left wants to protect grocery items, but not ballots. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show. I'm Jenny Beth Martin.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Today is Thursday, August 4th, and the United States Senate has 4 days scheduled before they leave town for the rest of August. And the president's number one agenda priority, the Save America Act, is not even on the Senate's radar right now. We are going to get into that. And also, we're going to be looking at what's happening in Iran. The economy might be roaring back. Todd Blanche is finally getting his vote. The Democrat Party is saying the quiet part out loud. They actually want to tear up our Constitution. We have two outstanding guests to help today. The first one is Ambassador Carla Sands, who served this country in Denmark and knows the America First agenda inside and out. And she's here for news of the day. Later in the show, State Representative from Maine, Barbara Bagshaw, who went knocking on doors in her own district and found something that is really very alarming about the voter rolls and the local districts in her area. It's going to concern all of you, I think. So we'll get into that with her near the end of the show. So let's get to it. Ambassador Carla Sands, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm just so glad to have you, and we're going to start out overseas. The president is calling the new talks with Iran, quote, the last chance, and he said he scrubbed a planned strike at the request of our Gulf allies. He's describing a two-phase deal. First, the shipping lanes, and then denuclearization. He says our Navy already controls the Strait of Hormuz. You know this region, you understand this president and the way he handles foreign countries. Is the president negotiating from a position of strength here?
Yes, of course. President Trump is negotiating from the ultimate position of strength because he's leading the world's only real superpower. China has proven that they are not that. And President Trump holds all the cards. Iran is trying to use, in their extremely weakened position, the Strait of Hormuz, and still trying to send a little money to their allies like the Houthi rebels, who are trying to also create mischief in the free flow of energy and goods. President Trump is not going to let Iran become a nuclear power, thank God, because that is a direct threat to the American people. But he's also saying he's going to make sure the Strait of Hormuz is open. How's he going to do that? Well, for the Iranian people's sake, I hope that their really awful, terrible, evil leaders will negotiate with President Trump and actually reopen the strait. But if they don't, it's going to be hell to pay for, unfortunately, for the Iranian people, because their infrastructure is going to be destroyed by our amazing, magnificent military.
Well, and it should be I think that Iran responds to strength and they don't respond to weakness. So if that is what we have to do in order to get their attention, that is what we have to do. Tehran is telling a bit of a different story. They're saying their foreign minister is claiming that they're not even negotiating with the United States. What do you make of this, and how do normal everyday Americans sort out when they're hearing one thing in the news from Iran and another thing from our president? I tend to believe the president of the United States and not the people running a terrorist regime in a foreign country.
Yeah, Jenny Beth, it's so true. So they don't ever tell the truth, but every country does some of this. There's the internal story for your people, right, of that nation. And then there's the external posturing of how they want to be perceived. And the Iranian mullah regime and the IRGC have perfected this. They pound their chests and they talk all big. Meanwhile, they have no more Navy. They have no more Air Force. They are decimated. Now, they do have some munitions, and China is trying to resupply them right now. President Trump is saying to China, stay out of this, but there are trucks and trains getting to Iran that the U.S. is working to cut off. There's different ways to get in from above, from Russia area, or from the east, from China area. So President Trump and his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and their teams are really all over this, working to get to a peace, because President Trump loves people and he loves life. He doesn't want to see people suffer. That's not who he is. At the same time, he understands his mandate: protect the American people so there cannot be a nuclear weapon in Iran, and the energy has to flow so that we don't have a global crash.
That is exactly right. And I also think that we have to make it where they cannot keep funding proxies to commit terroristic attacks either on Americans or other people throughout the world. That has to stop as well, in my opinion. It's time for everything that they've done for the last 47 years to be put in check and say no more. We're not allowing this.
Jenny Beth, you're so right. So there's a couple of examples. President Trump and his created Board of Peace have announced that Hamas has agreed to disarm. And this is historic, never been done. And he's working with Muslim majority countries to make this happen. And the world will be better off with Hamas disarmed. So they're going to get this done. Hezbollah is really under pressure from Israel because of what they've done in Lebanon, Hezbollah, but also how they've taken a Christian nation, Lebanon, and really created a place with a lot of terrorism and attacks on Israel from Lebanese soil. So what Israel is doing is they're pressing Lebanon. That'll be the next one. And then the Houthi rebels are another group that have been armed and funded by the Iranian regime. And so President Trump and the Saudis and others are working to change that. But they have not been handled yet because, I mean, drones are so cheap. But Jenny Beth, there's also the point that President Trump has said that he is going to insist that the Iranian money that's kind of locked in these accounts that the Iranians can't get their hands on is going to be used to repair and replace the damage that the Iranian regime has done on others, especially their neighbors there in the Middle East. And we have to understand as Americans, it's not like they have a president and a secretary of state. In Iran, really the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, is running that country. And there are 32 separate nodes of the Revolutionary Guard. They don't even have to talk to each other. So it's really hard to get our arms around as a superpower and get to peace when you've got these people who, somebody over here may be saying one thing and another group is going to do another. So it's hard to get that under control when these are powerful in their own right.
And I think that I understand everyone wants this done and over with, and they want it, and so many people just want it done before the elections. And then we've done polling on it recently and have seen that when you explain the situation with just a few sentences to the American people agree we have to stop this once and for all. We've got to finish the job. We don't want to come back and have to fight this in a few months from now or a few years from now or for ongoing for decades like we have done already for nearly 5 decades.
You're so right. So I was a young girl when in 1979 this all went down, and they have killed thousands of American servicemen over the decades. And let's not forget that every day from the podium and the pulpit in Iran, they said death to America. And they were lying about their missiles and how far they could go. They said they didn't have medium range missiles. And then we discovered, because of one they shot, that they could actually reach continental Europe. And if they can reach Europe today, what are they going to be able to achieve working with their friends like the Russians and the Chinese? And the North Koreans. So this is really unacceptable. And President Trump, thank God, is the first American president in my lifetime that said no more, not on my watch. And it's not popular. And I know he wants to be popular and everybody wants the price of gas to go down. But the difference between us being held hostage by a nuclear nation that has no good intentions for us is very, very evil. Is we can take a little pain at the pump for a short time in order to save our nation and our friends from this vile regime. And I do believe, Jenny Beth, that there will have to be regime change. I can see that they are not reasonable people, and they would rather rule over the ashes of just a decimated kingdom of over 90 million people than actually make the rational decision to get to peace with President Trump.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right about them. They're not rational at all. And they don't have our values. They don't have our sense of values at all. So it's hard to, even for us as Americans, to completely put ourselves in their shoes, because they don't approach the world, they don't approach life the same way that we do. And I appreciate the fact that President Trump is doing his very best to end this problem once and for all. I know that I suspect that there are times when he's going, was this the right thing? Maybe I shouldn't have used the political capital in this way. But this is one of the most America first things I think that he can do, because he's trying to make sure that our country is safe from a country that wishes us total destruction and wants to make sure they can never have a nuclear weapon. And I think that is looking out for America.
I totally agree with you, Jenny Beth. I mean, I'm so proud of what he and his team have done. Because like I said, I mean, I can remember being in the Bush White House and saying to his head of security, well, why don't you go in and take some bunker buster bombs? And this was early in their nuclear program, and just take it out if it's such a threat to the American people. And they said, no, we're just going to let the next team take care of that. And I was so horrified that, the commander in chief would just kick the can down the road and let someone else handle that, which no one had the nerve, right? The nerve, the strength, the spine to actually deal with this, even if President Trump knew this wasn't going to be popular. But the way he's reordering the world with Venezuela, Cuba, now Iran, weakening our greatest adversary, China, because these were all proxies for China, and diminishing Hezbollah's influence in our Western hemisphere, because Hezbollah was right in Venezuela, training terrorists right on South American soil. So it was a very unvirtuous cycle happening in our hemisphere that President Trump and his team are working to end. And I'm really proud of what he's done. In fact, I can't even tell you how excited I am that every day he's making progress in our security, in our economy, working so hard for all of us. He's going to work himself to death. Like, I hope he makes it through his entire presidency, but I just mean he's leaving it all on the table. He is not leaving an hour, I get chills, an hour or a minute to waste. He's working for us every day.
Yeah, that is exactly right. The man just doesn't rest. He is completely focused. So you mentioned the economy, and let's bring it back to America and home and talk about the economy. The news here is genuinely good, and we're not really hearing a lot of it. The American manufacturing just hit a 4-year high. Factory hiring is growing for the first time in almost 3 years. What does this tell you about the direction of the country, Carla?
It says that President Trump is reindustrializing America. He worked on it in his first term. At this term, he had those tariffs he had about a year ago. Those tariffs were to bring the manufacturing back to the United States. And so the jobs are growing, especially for people that work in that area. And that's why the lowest 25% of wage earners in America have actually made the biggest wage gains, because he's reindustrializing our country. And so this is only the beginning. You cannot imagine what it's going to look like a year and a half from now. We are becoming, again, the world's manufacturing powerhouse, like we were when I was a young girl. Steel, aluminum, pharmaceuticals, making ships, making more planes in America, making more munitions and faster. Lockheed Martin just announced that they're going to make cheap drones and more of them. So even the old legacy companies are working to manufacture at the speed of 21st century, which is exciting.
It really is exciting. And the wage increases that you were just talking about, I think that's one of the best ways to make to help us catch up with the inflation from the Biden era. Everyone is rightly concerned about the impact of inflation, and the prices, if the prices come down, especially if they come down too rapidly, we wind up in deflation, which is not good either. Neither inflation or deflation is good. But if you can grow the economy and people earn more money and they have more wages because the economy is growing and they've been able to get raises, so they're getting wage increases, it shrinks that gap between how much they're making and the increased price of goods. And hopefully we close that gap pretty soon.
Yeah, I agree with you. So there's a couple of ways to look at it. First of all, one wage earner should be able to support a family like they could when I was a kid. And I really think that those giant middle class, that's where most people are, in the middle class in America. Those wages haven't kept up with inflation over the last 30 or 40 years. So there is going to be some inflation as we increase the wages for those working people, and it's only right. Even doctors are really struggling, some of them now, to keep up with the cost of living. But I also want to just caution us when we talk about the cost of living going up so fast and so high. What our grandparents thought of as the middle class, it was one car in a family. It was one TV in the house, and there was a landline in the house. And there was maybe one vacation by car. There's an article, a really good one, I think it's in the Wall Street Journal today, talking about this. Our expectations as middle-class Americans has just skyrocketed. We all want a cell phone, and we want the best one, and we want this and that. And so I would say our quality of life and standard of living has really skyrocketed since our grandparents' time. When I think about the size of house that the grandparents lived in and their anticipation of vacations and things like that versus today, people have big eyes today. So, but at the same time, I really do believe, and looking at the numbers, it's true. The middle class wages have not kept up with inflation. And Jenny Beth, I will just say another thing. These jobs need to go to American citizens, people from our country, whether they're graduates from college or university, or whether they're just out of high school. We should not be bringing in visa workers to replace Americans, and American companies should be putting the people from their town and state first, and not just because it's cheaper, offshoring to places like India or bringing in a lot of visa workers to cut, $10 or $20 or $50,000 a year from the salary. I think this is a really big issue, Jenny Beth, that we need to take care of Americans.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And what you said about making sure or getting to a point where it's one income supporting a family, it's extremely important. When I got married many years ago, and I'm now divorced, one of the things that my dad said to me is that you need to make sure that you are working as quickly as you can to get to where you only need one income to support your family unit. And I'm divorced now, but that is what we did. We got to a point where we only needed one income to support the family unit. I still worked until very shortly before I got pregnant. And then again, after I got pregnant, we had all sorts of financial issues. But the point is that I didn't have to for a lot of that time. And it just gives you a lot more freedom and ability to navigate life if you're at a point where in a family unit, you can live with one income.
Jenny Beth, it's so true. The idea that a woman that has a child has the option of staying home and raising her child while that child is young. I did the same thing, Jenny Beth, and it was so rewarding to be with my dear daughter and to be able to share those moments with her and make sure her food was home cooked and she had good meals and the house was great. And it was a time that was very peaceful for our family and really wonderful. And I didn't have to worry as much about childcare and things like that. So I think the idea that women have options and that they don't have to stress is a blessing. Now, not every family can do it. And that's one of those things that I look at the middle class and say those wages have to keep up with inflation, because if we cut back a little bit and we're able to have one parents stay home with the child. Sometimes the mom is the main earner in the family. And if that's so, then hopefully the dad can spend more time. And there are companies that give you more, time with the family. So there's ways to do it where you can prioritize taking care of your little ones and really making them the center of your life during that time. And the payoff is unbelievable with, first of all, family cohesion, but also the well-being of the child. They just do better.
Yeah, I am so thankful that I was able to be at home with my twins when they were little. And it's time. You never get back. And as they're old, our children are older now. And as I look back, I'm like, oh, I had that precious time with them when they were so young, and every minute of every day. It was very special.
Very special.
Okay, let's move to one last question for this block, and that is the Senate Judiciary Committee is finally voting for Todd Blanche for Attorney General. He agreed to kill the anti-weaponization fund that was holding Cornyn and Tillis back. Yeah. What do you think of this? As it looks like he's going to be advancing and will become the Attorney General.
It does look like it. I think President Trump's planning to swear him in on Saturday if everything goes according to plan. And I'm so excited for Todd. He's a good man. He's been a great acting attorney general. I mean, I saw the pace of things really pick up after he took over. And it's a shame to see senators from your own side, from your own team, hold up a president's nominee because they want this or that. But they got what they wanted. The sad thing is that this fund was actually to help compensate the people that had been tortured, imprisoned, had lawfare come at them from the former Department of Justice under the former president, and how the people have been treated since Lois Lerner, what I saw of the oppression of Christians, conservative organizations, people who rallied when the president said peacefully and patriotically protest. And I'm not talking about people that did violent things. I'm talking about the majority of the people that are supporters of our Constitution and our country. And when you look at the bad things that the other side is now standing for, which is complete revolution and a taking down of everything that's made our country great, the founders put it in place, and we've all been blessed to live under this system. It is an existential threat to the well-being of our country, greater threat than any outside enemy.
You are exactly right. And Ambassador Carla Sands, we're going to come back and talk about that and some of the things that the Democrats are saying. They're pretty much saying out loud things that we never actually thought they would admit to. So we'll be right back after a very quick break. All right. Welcome back. And Ambassador Carla Sands is still with me. We're going to talk about the Democrats. But before we do that, let's talk about the Save America Act. The Senate has 4 days before they go on recess. And I am hoping that they don't go on recess and that they take more time in D.C. to work on the Save America Act. Ambassador Sands, you were with us last year when we were talking about it when it was still just the Save Act, and we went through Pennsylvania on our bus tour. What are you thinking about what's happening in the Senate, and what do you hope to see happen?
Well, Jenny Beth, I hope to see it pass, but it's looking more and more like Senator Thune is not going to bring it up. Now, I know that they were considering tucking it into another big bill, but they still have the parliamentarian there that's a Democrat parliamentarian that I don't think will let it go through. Now, can J.D. Vance override that? Yes, and he can override her, and he can call them back to the Senate, actually. I believe I read that even the House can call the Senate back for this legislation. Will they? I just don't see the spine from either the Senate or the House. But I'm hoping that, if we pray, I think we all need to pray for our country, pray that this passes, call our senators. We need to be focused on pressing that this is the most important bill that they'll ever pass. And if they don't bring this up, if they don't pass it, and we have about 18 or 20 senators now that have proudly signed on to say, yes, I'm willing to give up that August recess, stay in town and get it passed. If we see more, I think we'll hold the Senate and hold the House, because our grassroots need to see that the people they elected are working for them and passing the legislation that is important to the voters. If they don't, I think that the ones that don't vote for it and the ones that don't say, I'm going to stay in town and give up my recess and pass this most important legislation, which President Trump has asked them to do dozens and dozens of times, I think eventually they're going to be voted out of office, just like happened to two people recently in the Senate from my party. And I think that there's going to be upheaval. Now, we are a good party. We're behind our country, our Constitution, our God-given rights, and the virtuous things that family and country and love of God bring. However, I don't believe those senators will survive if they don't successfully pass the legislation the voters on both sides of the aisle are supporting.
I completely agree with you on that. It will be much more difficult for them. And if they think that they're immune from it, they should take a look at what happened with Senator Cornyn. Even in a state as big and as expensive as Texas, he was able to be primaried. And when we're asking for this, it isn't some abstract theory, the reason that we need proof of citizenship. In New Jersey, the Democrat leadership in New Jersey has now admitted to 6,600 non-citizens being on the voter rolls through an error in their motor vehicle, an error. They're saying it's computers. It is a terrible thing.
The data company says that's not true, Jenny Beth.
Right. They say it's not true. So there's a bunch of finger pointing going on, which is part of the problem. And if we just would check proof of citizenship from the very beginning, then they wouldn't get on the rolls and we wouldn't have to worry about getting them cleaned up afterwards. Now, this error, apparently, it started back in 2023, and it took all of this time to get it fixed. There are two House committees that are stepping in right now. There is a letter that I think we're going to be able to put up on the screen right now. The Committee on House Administration under Chairman Brian Steele and the Judiciary Committee under Chairman Jim Jordan, along with Representatives Laurel Lee and Jeff Andrew, have sent a letter to New Jersey, and it is a formal demand for the records. And they're trying to figure out, did you know that this was going on? How long did you know it was going on? They're supposed to be in compliance with the Help America Vote Act. And they're not maintaining the voter rolls the way that they are supposed to be. And it is just an absolute problem. So I'm glad the House is looking into it. What did you think when you heard about this in New Jersey?
Well, first of all, Jenny Beth, 400 of them admitted to voting, too, of these illegals. And Scott Pressler has come out and shown that there have been elections won by one vote, by about 100 votes, and under 400. So this could have been the difference between a House race outcome or a mayor's race outcome. So it has to be fixed. And my home state of Pennsylvania, they have the same thing. They have the motor voter law, and they don't check. You just have to state that it's true. Well, people that want to cheat. And the American people are a high trust society, but the people coming from outside, from other countries, are mostly not from high trust societies, and they're mostly from very corrupt societies, and they'll lie. They'll lie just to have the ability to do that. And they may even be encouraged by Democrat poll workers, because I've seen people walk out of offices and be just shown how you can vote, you can register to vote. And I've seen it on closed circuit camera, when I've seen the people doing this illegally, Democrat operatives registering illegal people to vote. So I know it's happening across the country. It must be hundreds of thousands, because I think that they actually admitted that there were tens of thousands of illegals on the voter rolls in New Jersey, and that's a tiny state. And Scott Pressler said in Pennsylvania that there's many, many people that were rejected from jury duty. And that means that they are non-citizens that had registered on purpose or inadvertently when they got a driver's license. I think it's problematic even to give driver's license to illegals. They don't often speak our language. They may not know the road signs. So all of this is really concerning.
It is extremely concerning. And in New Jersey, since 2023, there was at least one election in the state of New Jersey that was won by only 8 votes.
Wow.
So we really need to know, where did the non-citizens vote, and were non-citizens voting in some of these very close elections, even in the state of New Jersey? Now, that was a local race. It wasn't a race for Congress or a statewide race. But the point is, it can happen with Congress. It can happen with Senate races and statewide races, and most especially where the margins are the closest, it's in those local races. So that's where this stuff really starts adding up and makes a huge difference. And Carla, I don't know if you know this or not, but I was researching Alaska a couple of weeks ago and found that on their Division of Elections webpage, they admit that they have non-citizens on their voter rolls. And they even say, if you got a voter card and you're a non-citizen, there's a question on there. Why did I get a voter card if I'm a non-citizen? And it says, well, the way that we automatically register everyone, you got registered, so you need to remove yourself from the rolls. And after I did that, a few days later, after I did the research, I saw that they were admitting that they, in the state of Alaska, it's a small population, have over 3,000 non-citizens on their voting rolls right now. And this is a problem. If it's happening and it's that many in Alaska, it's a problem everywhere.
Yeah, there's 750,000 people living in Alaska. It's not even a million. So those row offices, the school board elections, they're all going to be affected if those illegals are voting, which probably some of them are. I mean, that's just how it goes. So President Trump and his team are working. They're working with the Congress to get legislation. He's done executive orders. But the left, the judges are trying at every turn to block him from securing our elections, because the Democrats have literally said out loud, if we can't do this, we're not going to win elections. They're out of good ideas. The people don't like their ideas. The only way they can win is bussing in voters, mailing in, the 8 that they get at their doorstep, the 8 ballots they get at their doorstep rather than just their own. And that's how they're, one by one, they're cheating and winning. If they have good ideas, they can win fair and square. We need clean elections. And the American people, even the Democrats, it's more than 70% say they want voter ID and proof of citizenship in order to vote. So there's no reason that this Senate, we have the presidency, the House, and the Senate must pass the Save America Act. And it just seems like they don't have the will. So I think we need to pray. We need to call, right? You pray and you do, and do everything we can that's humanly and spiritually possible in order to pass the Save America Act. And that if we do it, we're going to hold the House and the Senate.
That's exactly right. Okay, now let me bring up one other topic related to election integrity, and then we'll do a call to action and move on. So at the start of the show, I was talking about how in New York City, the mayor's government-run grocery stores, which is such a problem. But if I started out by saying the communist mayor's government-run grocery store, at least it makes more sense, is going to require some sort of identification to shop. Now, at first, it sounded like a photo ID, but the mayor's office has come back and said, oh, no, it's just going to be a loyalty card. And that will determine how much of a discount you can get, whether you have your loyalty card or not. A bunch of members of Congress, like Senator Mike Lee and Marsha Blackburn and Rick Scott, and members of the House of Representatives were saying, look, this is crazy. You're requiring an ID to buy groceries. You've got to have an ID to board a plane, to buy cold medicine, all of these things. But you're not supportive of having an ID to vote. It's just, it is just absolute hypocrisy. The communist mayor in New York cares more about protecting the items in that store that is a government-run store and should never even exist than he does about protecting ballots.
Yes, of course. He's a communist attempting to implement his idea of utopia, which is he controls everyone and the big government will leave nothing to choice to the people. And he's going to chase out the rich people by putting a big tax on not just the people with a pied a terre, but everybody with expensive real estate. And that includes people who bought things 30, 40 years ago and still own it, but now it's valuable and then it was inexpensive. So this guy, and he's also an anti-Semite, let's just say, I can remember him saying from the river to the sea, and that means genociding the Jews because that means there are no Jews left. And so this is not a good guy. He's a bad guy. I'm ashamed that people in New York voted for him. Shame on them. And now they're getting what they deserve, which is really bad policies. And whenever government takes over, like he's taking over with making these government-run grocery stores, it crowds out private enterprise. So what'll happen is the little bodegas owned by the Koreans or the Hispanics, they're going to go out of business because they can't compete on price with what the mayor is providing. And some of the big grocery stores will probably close some of their locations, Gristedes, whatever, in New York City. They just won't be able to make it competing against a 30% lower price. This mayor doesn't understand economics. He doesn't understand business. He was a rapper influencer. And he's a trust fund, he's like a trust fund baby. He's a silver spoon kid, born in Uganda, grew up as a rich kid in Uganda, he's been a citizen for maybe 10 years, maybe less, of the United States, doesn't understand our values. And he was raised by a Marxist dad who's a professor. And so we have a guy who's just been brainwashed and now he's a true believer and he's an anti-Semite and he wants to implement communism, because he talks about from each according to his ability, from each according to their, it's a communist saying. It's about you kind of give what you can give and you get what you can get. And so pure Marxism, we can't support this. It's un-American. And I mean, there are laws on the books that don't allow this. And I'd love to see him, confidentially, I'd love to see him sent back to Uganda if he lied on his the immigration papers that he filled out.
Well, if he lied, that's a real problem. You're not supposed to lie on those papers, and there are consequences for it. Okay, so let me go get our call to action about the Save America Act, and then we're going to come back and talk more about the communists in the Democrat Party. So what we need everyone to do is to pick up the phone and call the switchboard, dial 202-224-3121. Again, 202-224-3121, and tell both of your senators to stay in session in D.C. and to pass the Save America Act before they leave town. You can go to passthesaveamericaact.com. Again, that's passthesaveamericaact.com. You can email your senators from that website and also have your questions or your answers to your frequently asked questions are there. And then I think that we're able to pull up we've got one other slide for you right there. That is the list of all of the senators who have not yet said that they are willing to stay in session. So we still have about 34 senators who have not yet said they're willing to stay in session. We have, I think, 19 now who have said that they will stay, they want to stay in session and keep working on the Save America Act. It's out on my social media at Jenny Beth M. It's got the name, the phone number, and their Twitter ID, so you can comment on X with them and put a message to them directly. You can call their offices directly. We need to be melting these phone lines and make sure that they know that we really do want the Save America Act passed. Now, one more thing. If you, before we get into our next segment, if you like what we are doing and you feel like it is worth your time, would you just take 2 seconds right now and hit the like and subscribe button? That lets our algorithms know to push this broadcast to more constitutional conservatives across the country. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's one of the most powerful things you can do to help us continue to get the word out. And now we're back with Ambassador Carla Sands. And Carla, let's keep talking about some of the things that the Democrats have been saying. This weekend, former Vice President Kamala Harris, who was the nominee or the appointed nominee for president with the Democrats in the last election, said, and I quote, "We need to revisit the Electoral College, expand the Supreme Court to 13 judges or justices, and grant statehood to Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C." And then Pete Buttigieg went further, and he was on the Diary of a CEO podcast, and he said that he wants to abolish the Electoral College and talked about packing the Supreme Court and said these aren't even radical ideas. Here, let's watch both of them. We're going to start with Kamala Harris and then Pete Buttigieg, and then I'll get your feedback.
For example, and I know this is going to be controversial coming from me in particular, we need to revisit the Electoral College. We need to revisit the point of expanding the court to 13 justices like we have 13 district courts. We need to revisit, if they so want, statehood for Puerto Rico and D.C.
Yes.
Okay, so that was from Yahoo News. And now let's watch Pete Buttigieg.
You're keen to remove the Electoral College and do it based on numbers, the quantity of votes for either presidential candidate.
And I still can't believe that anybody considers this radical. Like, to me, there's nothing radical about thinking the person who gets the most votes ought to be the winner. But I think people haven't thought through how much benefit would come from that. If we did that, there are so many votes in red and blue states that you couldn't ignore anymore. Like, if you were running for president as a Democrat, you'd have to go to Texas.
Yeah.
And even if Texas is still going to vote mostly for Republicans, you'd have to turn out every Democratic vote you could in Texas. And I just think we'd be so much better off if a Republican and Democratic candidate were competing over Texas. And by the way, New York, even if New York is definitely going to vote more for Democrats, a Republican candidate would have to come to New York. And states from Alaska to Rhode Island, so it's small states too, that get ignored now, would finally be part of this competition. So yeah, Electoral College for sure. Supreme Court needs to change.
Court. What would you do to the Supreme Court?
I would have term limits, more justices, and some process that makes it less partisan who the justices are. Some different ways to do that. The one I think is most interesting is called the balanced bench proposal. We have a mix. But anyway, the point is it needs to change.
Yep.
Ambassador Carla Sands, revisit the Electoral College, pack the court, and at least Kamala Harris said that she thought that it was a bit radical for her to say, but Pete Buttigieg doesn't think it's radical at all. What do you think when you hear them saying this?
I think that they know it's radical, but they're trying to. So the left they have a trick. They say crazy things and they try to run further to the left really hard, really fast. And then they incrementally get some of that. And then there's pushback. And then they run further and harder to the left. And then they get some of what they want. And so we're the right, we're sort of the stalwart supporters of the constitutional order, the laws that we follow, and helping the American people be more prosperous and more secure. The left is always trying to work to put in place not more progressive policies, because it's not progress, it's regressive. It leads to anarchy, and it leads to a revolution, not like the American Revolution, but like the French Revolution, where they cut off heads and they paraded them around on pikes. And that's why you hear some of the Democrat candidates talking about putting heads on pikes, including John Fetterman's, because he's not speaking their talking points. The idea of packing the court means they don't like what the court is doing. Although the court was to the left for 50 years, Republicans never suggested this. We just worked to change the court. They're not willing. So they are just going to try to pack it if they win. And the chances of them winning, it's 50-50 in America. We have two strong parties. I'm sad, really, that the Democrat leaders aren't saying these are bad ideas. We should push back against democratic socialists. We shouldn't pack the court. Of course, Puerto Rico and DC should not be states. They have no business being states. Instead, we should have better ideas that people will vote for. But they're not trying to improve their policies. They're just trying to rig the election by these very bad anarchic ideas. They're anarchy. They lead to chaos. And that's what they're trying to do by having a vote that's every vote is equally weighted rather than having the Electoral College. Pete Buttigieg is lying to people. We all work in every state. Both parties work hard to win every vote. But what he's trying to do is give the big blue states and big blue cities more power so they can control the elections. This is a bad idea because people throughout the country mostly don't live in those states and cities. They live scattered throughout the country. And so the people would be greatly disadvantaged. He's lying. The people of Alaska, of New Hampshire, their vote would no longer matter at all because those big blue cities and states would just eat them up.
You're exactly right about that. We wouldn't even have a country had we not come up with a compromise that had the House and or maybe it wasn't a compromise, but the system that had the House and the Senate and the Electoral College. The House is based on population. The Senate is based on the states, so that no matter whether your state is large or small, every single state in the country, which has its own state government, has an equal footing in Congress. And that is the same thing that happens with the Electoral College. Every single state has equal footing. And then you also have a change based on the population. So not change, but vote based on the population. And a state may wind up with more electoral votes or less electoral votes, depending on the population. It is a wonderful system. It's worked for 250 years or nearly 250 years. And to come in and want to get rid of that, to want to completely change the Supreme Court and add things to the court that never were intended to be there, it's rigging the system, change it. You don't like it. You didn't win the last election, so you want to rig the system, fix the system so that when you do regain power, you can never, ever lose power again. It's completely wrong. And as far as Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., they want to do that to add more seats to the Senate, which is kind of ironic since they want to abolish the Senate at the same time. But here's what I think is really important. When they say that it's the mainstream Democrats or the moderate Democrats or the middle of the road Democrats, there is no such thing as a moderate Democrat. What Kamala Harris, who was the person who was on the ballot to be the president of the United States in the last election from the Democrat Party, Pete Buttigieg, who was part of the cabinet in the last administration, when they're saying these radical things that will gut our entire Constitution and our constitutional government, they are as radical as the communist mayor of New York City who wants to have government-run grocery stores. So when we're watching right now today in Michigan, there are all these reports on the news. Oh, the Democrat Senate candidates in Michigan. It is a fight for the heart and soul of the Democrat Party. No, you've already told us what your heart and soul is. Your heart and soul is socialism and communism.
It's true. And in fact, some of them are even saying we should do away with the presidency. We should do away with the Senate. We should have a leader appointed by the Congress, and we should do away with the Supreme Court. So the ideas are, like you said, really radical. This is not the party, the Democrat Party of our grandparents. And now we can see people coming out like former Senator Manchin, like, what's his name? He's a big Democrat, older fellow. They're talking, the old school Democrats, about how their vote is now in play. So I don't want to say, oh, this is a big gift to Republicans that they've gone so radical. No, they're dangerous. They have foot troops with Antifa, this black bloc group that likes to cause trouble. So they will probably, in the lead up to the election, unless President Trump has that National Guard out, they will try to create chaos and scare people. And then there will be threats against people, like we see Amy Coney Barrett changing her vote after she got the death threats on herself, her kids, and her pets. After those threats came, after she voted for life, her votes have changed because she's terrified of the left. So we cannot live in fear. We have to stop this Democrat progression into communism. And we need Democrats to stand up and say, no, this is not right. They need to be the adults in the room for their own party. We can't do this from the outside.
That is exactly right. And you can't cower when you have to have courage, and you cannot cower in the face of fear. And if they see weakness, they will keep going. If they see any willingness to bend, they will keep pushing as far and as hard left as they possibly can go. And we have to be able to stand up and say, no, not on our watch. We are going to keep liberty in this country.
That's right.
Ambassador Carla Sands, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Jenny Beth. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to come back after a very short break. And then we've got, when we do come back, a state representative from Maine, and you're not going to believe what she found out while she was going door to door in her own district. You are the grassroots of America. You love this country. When you love something, really love it, the news doesn't just inform you, it fires you up. And you find yourself asking, how can I make a difference? That is exactly what this show is built to answer. Never, ever, ever, ever give up. We owe it to every American who has ever voted to make America great again. We owe it to our future selves. We owe it to this republic to stand tall, to stay active, and to be smart about how we spend our energy so that we can win. Here on the Jenny Beth Show, we're going to help you do exactly that. Every show, we will break down the news, connect it to first principles, and give you specific, effective ways to take action. Not just outrage, action. And I am so glad you're here on this journey with us to do it. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Welcome back. My next guest is a state representative from Windham, Maine, and she found something just simply knocking on doors in her own district. It's the kind of thing that's really going to upset you and make your stomach drop. Representative Barbara Bagshaw, welcome to the show, and tell us what you found. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jenny Beth. I actually met you when you were here with Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going door to door. I'm like, I love going door to door. I love serving my people. I like to talk to them. And I go door knocking even when it's not my election. This will be my third go for the House. And I go knocking during school board and town council races. So everybody's like, oh, Barbara's here. So I was going down one particular road and I'm like, that apartment building isn't in my district. And I'm like paper girl. I don't use apps. I have printed books. I have 3 separate books that I've used, and I'm comparing. I keep them in the car. I'm comparing. I'm like, yeah, this is definitely not supposed to be in my district. And then I went to the next house, and it's 2 friends of mine. I'm like, I know they weren't in my district. And then I went to the next house, the same thing, and then the next apartment building, and then the next house. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I took my books and I went down to see my town clerk, and I'm like, Anthony, this is a problem. You know, he's like, well, let's just check. Oh, that's in your district, District 106. I said, can we look at the last election that I ran in? Oh, that's 107. How did that happen? Well, I guess the RNC is doing a deep dive, and they found that 110 voters were relocated from District 107 to my District 106. And they found other towns the same problem happening, you know, and I reached out, well, my office reached out to the Secretary of State, and Deputy Flynn said, oh, this is a glitch. It's a glitch. We'd be happy to print you a new voter roll free of charge. Okay. Well, I paid for the other one, you know, and I've gone to at least half of the houses, because I go to every house every time I run, because I'm reapplying for the job. I go to Democrats and unenrolled and Republicans. And so I have to transfer all that information to the new book. And I wrote that letter. I think you have a copy of that letter to the Secretary of State. And, you know, I said, thank you for the offer of the new voter roll. However, how did this quote unquote glitch happen? And please respond within 7 days. And, you know, my first race, I won by 23. One of our
by 23 votes?
Yes, my first race. Yeah. And one of my friends won the school board race by 7, you know, and so these numbers are strangely close. And so it's a huge problem. And I had several election integrity bills in this session to reverse the Electoral College, what do you call that? The national popular vote,
Yeah.
which they gave away our voices last session. So this session, it passed the House by 5, and then it failed in the Senate by 1 twice. So my Senator Nangle was the deciding vote to make sure that we give our voice away in presidential elections. But also the Secretary of State, I had same-day voter registration bill. She came and opposed it. League of Women Voter, oh, this is racist, everything, blah, blah, blah. And, we have the Representative Mark Cooper is on the other side of Windham, and we're sitting there, everybody, hi, Barbara, hi, he's a farmer. I'm like at everybody's door all the time. So we knew everybody in the morning. But then between 2 and 6 o'clock, we're like, do you know any of these people? No. Last time we had like 174 same-day voter registrations. This time we had 96. And so I went in the day after the election and said, I'd like to have a report of all the same-day voter registrations. And he said, okay, I have 15 days to get to that. But we have a brand new appointed clerk we used to elect. They used to have to be from Windham, but this one, somehow it passed by 30-something votes that they're going to appoint rather than elect. So he's like, I have 15 days to get you that. Okay. So then he said, oh, the secretary said they're updating the system. So it's going to be July 1st before you can get that. So July 1st comes. He's like, oh, she said around July 1st. So I FOIA'd the information the 24th of July. And he said, well,
when was the election? When was the election?
In June.
So 8 weeks later.
It's over 50 days. And so I was like, when am I going to get this information? And I had gone in and copied down off all the green card same-day voter registrations, but somebody suggested that I get something hard copy in case it comes back looking different than what I had recorded. So they said, well, we still don't have that information, but we have a compromise. We can photocopy a redacted form of all those green cards. So I got that. And I went through a few of them, and I called somebody that I happened to know, and she was kicked off the voter roll. And she can't remember if she was independent or a Republican, but she said, I went to vote and they told me I can't vote because I'm not registered. And I said, my clerk said, well, she probably got kicked off because after 2, gubernatorial or presidential elections, they take people off that are inactive, which they don't do. And it's almost impossible to get any voters taken off the list. And you go and say, they haven't lived here for 10 years. And they're like, well, the secretary has to do it. I said, there's no building there. There's no building. Please take them off, And so we have a registrar that's good at taking off the people as they die. She's checking and she takes those off. But anyway, my friend got taken off the voter roll, and she goes, they told me I couldn't vote, and I had to register again. She goes, I registered it as a Democrat so I wouldn't be targeted. I was like, wow, that you would have to say something like that. And it was a primary, so she said, I didn't know anybody to vote for. But anyway, it's ridiculous. And I've been canvassing, and I found 4 other people that were kicked off the voter roll. And I had been through half of my roll already. And I'm thinking, wow, all these people have moved. And then I was on this one particular road, and I'm like, those are the same people that were there last time. Why are they not on my roll? So I went to the door, and she goes, oh yeah, we voted for you last time. We'll vote for you again. Well, she was taken off. And then I found another Republican at the end of the same road, taken off, voted last time for me. And, so they're purging the rolls, but what are they purging? And, the Secretary of State's office reached out to me. They said, oh, we received this, blah, blah, blah. And then Julie Flynn reached out to me again. I said, can I please get that same-day voter registration information that I requested the next business day after the last election? And she's like, oh, I have some free time between 10, whatever time. She gave me 2 time periods that I could pick to talk about this on the phone and why I wanted it. I said, no, I'd rather handle this by email. And I would also like to know, when can I get that report? When are you going to update your system? She goes, oh, I think he might have misinformed you about that. I said, okay, just get me the information, please. And because he showed me, I can't push the button because it's not updated. So whatever. So she still hasn't, I sent that letter 6 days ago. I still haven't gotten the same day voter registration from Deputy Flynn. And I also asked, I said, why did this person get kicked off the voter roll and who did it? For what reason? And because my clerk said that she had moved, and clearly she hasn't. So.
That is just craziness. So you've got they're saying that new people, the lines changed in your district. At least that's what the town clerk said. But then you ask the Secretary of State and they're saying, oh, no, it was just a glitch in what we printed. And then you've got people who were removed from the voter rolls, and that's a glitch. And then you've got people who you're trying to get the updated information with people who registered to vote on election day, and they can't get that to you. And you're talking about 100 people. It's not that hard. The clerk should be able to enter it, and the Secretary of State should be able to accept it. That's
they're updating their system, and this is the same Secretary of State who took the Republican nominee for president, Trump, off the ballot, and she's also the same secretary that was in charge of the 250 ballots that ended up in an Amazon box at a resident's house. And she sent somebody from her office to collect those. And we've never gotten an explanation to how they got there and why they were there. And it's like a clown show. It's like, how many glitches are there? And, we have like willy-nilly, we have no voter ID. We have 90 days to request a ballot. We have 30 days to vote by mail. I mean, I'm going to apartments and it says it's 2 independents or 2 Democrats, and there's 2 undocumented Ukrainians there. So when all these unsolicited ballots that you can order one at a time on the internet, end up at somebody else's apartment, and the same people have moved. So what's going to stop those 2 Ukrainians from just mailing it in, sending it in? Yeah, no problem here. We have, no cameras on the drop boxes. Republicans voted yes. Democrats said no. Why don't you want cameras on the drop boxes? Why don't you want voter ID? How do we keep having these glitches? I mean, these are important things. They just raised our taxes again by vote, and we've got to have this voter ID put in. And tomorrow will be 7 days. I requested an answer from the Secretary of State by tomorrow, and we'll see what she does. But she does what she does, and.
Well, I hope that you get an answer, and I want you to come back and let us know what the answer is. If there are that many problems with the computer system, somebody needs to go in and do an audit of the system, not an audit of the election. I mean something different. I mean, someone needs to go in and thoroughly test the system and figure out how it's breaking down so much. If it's human error, they need to figure out how the system could allow so many human errors. And otherwise, if it's nefarious, we need to know what's going on and get to the bottom of that.
Because I have my voter rolls. It's printed. It's not a glitch. This was this district this time. This is this district now. And
and you're getting 2 different stories. It sounds like, because your clerk is saying the district changed and it shouldn't have, and then the Secretary of State is saying, oh, it was just a little error.
Yeah, it's a big error. It's a big error. Like I said, these elections, my friend won by 7. I won by 23 one time. And, we use the ES&S 200. And, some people don't believe that I was told by a good source that they can be switched on and switched off to transmit. And I spoke at an election integrity summit on that and spoke to a number of people who said, yes, that is the case. So who's counting?
Okay, so keep it up. And it's hard to know right now. Just, I know what you're saying about the system that you're using for the final balloting, but it's hard to know what is being used. One of the things I learned in Georgia is that you've got Dominion for casting the ballots and counting the ballots. But before you ever get to that point, there are like 3 or 4 other computer systems in place. You've got the system for the voter rolls. You've got a system to check in ballots and check ballots out for absentee. There are a bunch of different computer systems. And it's possible there are glitches. I used to program computers. It's possible, but it's also really convenient to just blame everything on the computer system. And no matter what, it has to be resolved. You've got to know who your constituents are.
Yeah.
And people need to know whether they're voting for you or not.
Yeah. And it's not just this town. They're checking statewide, and there's 2 other towns that are, they haven't gotten to the bottom of the RNC's looking into it. So, I had one of my volunteers had an absentee ballot come to him last time I ran for election. His brother lives with him. He received District 107's ballot at the same home. And then a 3rd ballot came from a woman who lives in a camper in Buckfield to the same house. She hasn't been there for 2 years. So what's going on? It's, there needs to be a better, we have to know who we're voting for and where they are covering and whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you keep us updated, Barbara. I want to know how it gets resolved, and let me know if there's anything. I don't know what I can do to help, but if there is something I can do to help, let me know. And then let me ask you one last question. So you're the lawmaker who found this by walking your own neighborhood.
Yes.
I guess it's really 2 questions. What if you hadn't walked it?
Yeah.
What would you have done?
Yeah.
And why is election integrity worth so much? This fight just worth so much of your time?
Because there's a big problem, and I love my state, and I see it being burned down 1 vote at a time. And everybody's like, how come all the people we want to get elected don't get elected? And how come the people that don't do any work, that are most hated, that are going against the will of the people, how come they keep getting elected? So I love my state. I love my home. I don't want to leave. It's worth fighting for. And I take my job seriously.
Well, your state is wonderful, and it is worth fighting for. So keep doing it.
Thank
Representative Barbara Bagshaw of Maine, thank you so much for your diligence, your hard work, your commitment to election integrity. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Jen.
All right. All of us need to be paying attention to these election integrity issues. And if you want to be involved and you're not sure how to be involved with election integrity, you can go to tprettypatriots.org for more information. And you can also check out the Election Integrity Network, which is what Cleta Mitchell founded, and they do amazing work. We've helped with training a lot of the people who are part of that network, and we love partnering with them. So if you're concerned about voter rolls in your own area, I urge you to check out Election Integrity Network for that. If you want to learn how you can be a poll watcher or poll worker, pay attention to Tea Pretty Patriots Action. We're going to have more information on that in the next coming weeks. We've got to get through the Save America Act first. All right, before I close the show, just a few more things. One more time, because the clock is ticking. 4 days until the Senate goes on recess. So call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 and tell both of your senators stay in session and pass the Save America Act. Only American citizens should decide American elections. And then if you're enjoying this show and you really like it, just go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It really helps our algorithm, and it helps us make sure that we can reach more people and get people coming back. So hit like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it if you could do that favor for us. And finally, I want to close today with a moment from this weekend's Sunday news shows that really says a lot about what we're facing and why everything that we're doing matters so much. The Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert Kennedy Jr., was on CNN with Dana Bash, and they got into a heated, well, maybe not heated, but into an argument and a debate over the government's response to COVID. Kennedy made a simple point that in any future pandemic, protecting Americans' constitutional rights has to come first. And watch how Dana Bash responded and answered him.
We need to protect our constitutional rights. That is the primary obligation of our country. What does that mean? Well, during COVID, we completely dismantled our constitutional rights. We began censoring people in violation of the First Amendment.
But you're saying what not to do. I'm asking what to do. But I want to talk about.
That's something to do. That is the number one priority. We protect the Constitution. The Constitution was written.
Forgive me, but you're talking about rights, and I'm asking about a potential public health crisis. that is coming. But
I get so angry every time I watch that. It's very difficult for me. She interrupts him and says, what does that mean when you ask about protecting constitutional rights? And then she says, she interrupts him again when he's trying to explain it and says, you're talking about what not to do. And he's like, no, this is what to do. It's the thing. It's a priority. And she's like, oh, no, rights are not important. We need to worry about a future disease. For the record, here is what is confirmed from this. When Kennedy says that is the number one priority, we protect the Constitution. And when she turns around and Dana Bash says, forgive me, you're talking about rights and I'm talking about a potential health crisis that is coming. Do you hear what happened there? He said, protect people's rights. And she said, in effect, I'm talking about a disease. Rights don't matter. And that's the whole point. That's the entire argument. It's what we've been fighting for the last 6 years since COVID started, for the last 17 years since this modern day Tea Party movement started. What Bobby Kennedy said is exactly right. It is the government's duty to protect our rights. It's not my opinion. It is the founding promise of this country. The Declaration of Independence says it clearly. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Let's read that part one more time. Governments are instituted to secure these rights. That's the job. That's the whole reason government exists. Our rights do not come from government. Government is supposed to protect our rights. And that duty, that responsibility, that purpose from the government, it does not disappear the moment there is a crisis. In fact, when there is a crisis, that's when it matters the absolute most. Our rights come from our Creator. The government didn't give them to you, and the government cannot take them away. We live through a time when they forget that. And we saw what happened to our children and our grandchildren. We saw people dying because the government so badly messed up the response to COVID. We owe it to our children and every future generation to ensure that what happened and what we endured during COVID never happens again. I am Jenny Beth Martin, and this is the Jenny Beth Show. We'll see you tomorrow. If you enjoyed today's conversation, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people who care about liberty and the Constitution. You can find this and other episodes at jennybethshow.com, as well as Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, and your favorite podcast platform.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.